The courtroom was silent until he laughed. A wealthy defendant, dressed in an expensive suit, smirked as he leaned back in his chair, oozing arrogance. His crime? Serious. His attitude? Even worse. But what truly shocked the room was his blatant disrespect toward the judge, an experienced black woman known for her no-nonsense approach to justice. "You can't be serious," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. The tension in the air thickened as murmurs rippled through the spectators. Everyone knew this judge didn't tolerate foolishness, yet here he was, mocking her in front of the entire court. But as she straightened in her seat, her expression calm yet unreadable, something shifted. The defendant thought he had power, thought his money made him untouchable. But what happened next? No one in that room saw it coming, and it left everyone, especially him, completely stunned. The judge, Judge Thompson, was no stranger to challenges in her courtroom. With over 20 years of experience, she had seen it all: defendants trying to manipulate the system, lawyers pulling every trick in the book, and people who thought their wealth or status could shield them from the law. But this was different. The defendant, Michael Harris, came from one of the wealthiest families in the city. His arrogance wasn't just a product of his privilege, it was a lifestyle. His family name had bought him influence, but not immunity. He believed his case would be no different from the others he'd seen dismissed for the slap on the wrist. But Judge Thompson wasn't one to back down. She had earned her reputation as a fair but firm authority figure, and no one, especially not a rich, entitled man like Harris, was going to make a mockery of her courtroom. She glanced at the bailiff, who nodded, and then, without a word, the unexpected happened. As the courtroom buzzed with whispers, Judge Thompson remained eerily calm, her gaze never wavering from Harris. The sound of her gavel striking the wood echoed through the room, signaling the start of the next phase. But Harris didn't seem concerned. He leaned forward, his smirk widening, as if daring her to do something about it. His defense attorney, a slick, polished man named Victor Simmons, tried to steer the situation back to familiar ground, citing Harris's history of philanthropy and the possibility of a lesser sentence. But the judge didn't look at him. Instead, her attention remained locked on Harris, whose confident, almost mocking, demeanor only seemed to grow more audacious. What Harris didn't know was that Judge Thompson had a history with the Harris family. Years ago, she had fought against their influence in a case that was much bigger than this one that involved shady dealings, money laundering, and the kind of corruption that made powerful people sweat. She had lost that battle, but she had never forgotten it. In the back row, a woman named Lisa Collins, an investigative journalist who had been covering the trial, watched intently. She had her own reasons for being there. Lisa knew there was more to the story than just the charges Harris faced. She had been digging into the Harris family's business dealings for months, and what she'd uncovered so far pointed to something far darker than anyone had realized. But was Judge Thompson ready to confront that history, especially now that Harris was mocking her in front of everyone? The tension between past and present, power and justice, was about to collide in a way that no one saw coming. The silence in the courtroom felt suffocating now. Everyone was watching, waiting for what would come next. Judge Thompson's hand rested lightly on the gavel, but she made no move to strike it again. Instead, her gaze never left Harris, who still hadn't fully grasped the gravity of the situation. He thought he could get away with his disrespect. He thought his family's money and connections would make all the difference. But in that moment, a subtle shift began to unfold. Lisa sat up straighter in the back of the room, her fingers tightening around her notepad. She'd seen this kind of tension before, but never quite like this. Her instincts told her that something was going to break wide open, and it wasn't going to be the way anyone expected. She had pieced together enough of the puzzle of the past few months to know that the charges against Harris were just the tip of the iceberg. There was something bigger lurking beneath the surface, something that could expose the darkest corners of the Harris empire. Suddenly, Harris's smirk faltered. His eyes flickered to the judge, then to the people watching him, as if he finally realized that his confidence had been misplaced. The room's energy shifted, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her to act. Judge Thompson's voice cut through the stillness. "Mr. Harris, you may have played the system before, but this time," she paused, her words hanging in the air like a threat. Her hand slowly lifted, and for a moment, everyone wondered what she would do next. Would she show mercy, or would she do what she had promised herself years ago, finally bring justice to a family that had escaped it for far too long? The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder now. Harris stood, looking uncomfortable, as his attorney whispered urgently in his ear. But whatever plans they'd made didn't seem to matter anymore. The walls were closing in. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The courtroom doors swung open, and a new figure entered, one that none of them had been prepared for, the very person who could change everything. The doors creaked open, and every head in the courtroom turned. A man in a dark trench coat stepped inside, his presence unsettling in its suddenness. He was a stranger to most, but Lisa's heart skipped a beat as she recognized him. Detective Michael Ward, the one person she had been hoping would show up, but not like this. He wasn't scheduled to testify, and yet here he was, walking in with purpose, his eyes locked on Harris. Ward's reputation was well known, sharp, relentless, and never afraid to shake up the status quo. But this wasn't just a surprise witness. The tension in the room shifted again, this time to something darker, something more dangerous. Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow, her earlier calm now replaced by something that— "This changes everything," she said. "Mr. Harris, your actions have not only harmed the community, you've betrayed the trust of this court." As Harris tried to come up with a response, his lawyer, Victor Simmons, was already scrambling to control the damage. But the damage was done. Detective Ward's timing was impeccable, and the evidence couldn't be refuted. Judge Thompson knew she had one chance to do what was right, and she took it. Before she could deliver her verdict, the door to the courtroom swung open once again, and this time it was someone unexpected. Harris's father, Victor Harris, the patriarch of the family. His expression was cold, calculating, and dangerous. The room froze as he stepped forward, glancing at the judge with a chilling smile. "You think this will stop anything?" Victor Harris' voice rang out, confident and dismissive. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. My family owns this city, and nothing you do will change that." The courtroom erupted in a wave of gasps and murmurs. Lisa's heart raced as she realized the stakes were even higher than she'd thought. This wasn't just about Michael Harris. It was about a family with the power to ruin anyone who crossed them. But just as the tension reached its peak, there was a sound, loud, unmistakable, and sharp. Judge Thompson slammed her gavel down with force. "Enough," she declared. "Mr. Harris, your threats won't silence the truth, and the law will have its say, no matter who stands in the way." For a brief moment, it seemed like the Harris family's grit on power might still win out. But as the judge's voice rang out, the unexpected happened. Michael Harris collapsed in his seat, his face pale, his hands shaking. The realization dawned on him in an instant. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a system finally pushing back against everything his family had built. As Harris trembled, the final twist revealed itself. The detectives' investigation hadn't only been about uncovering financial crimes. They had discovered something far more sinister: Victor Harris' connection to high-ranking officials in the city, and a network that had been controlling the justice system itself. The evidence wasn't just about bribery or laundering. It was about a full-blown conspiracy to undermine the law, one that had manipulated cases and silenced witnesses for years. And suddenly, it was clear that the courtroom wasn't just a place for a trial. It was the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would see the fall of a powerful dynasty. The Harris family was no longer untouchable. The stakes had been raised, and no one, not even Victor Harris, could predict how this would all play out.